I'm going to bring this meeting of the school committee to order and ask all of you to join with me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
United States of America
and to the
the
republic
republic
for which it
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and
justice
justice
for all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome.
All right.
Here he comes. I'm going to have Eric enter now.
Patty, you take it from here.
Hi, Eric. Can you hear me? It's Patty.
I can. How are
Oh,
you?
good. Good to see you again. Again, I apologize. It's over Zoom, but it's the world we're all living in, our new normal, as we're calling it.
I understand.
So at this point, before we start, I was going to ask the school committee members to each introduce themselves. So you have a name with a face. Obviously, you know me. We've spoken a few times.
Yes.
I'll turn it over to Bob. Will introduce himself.
All right, let me unmute myself. Hi, Eric. My name is Bob Morgan. I'm secretary of the school committee. I'm on my third term, and I'm up for re-election for my fourth. And I've been a resident of Plymouth for 20 years.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Now we'll go to Michelle.
Hi, Eric. And it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I'm Michelle Badger. I've been on the school committee 9 years, and like Bob, I'm up for election this year. I am a graduate of the Plymouth school system, and I'm a member of the committee.
Very good. Nice to see you.
All right. Ann Lee, Trishelli.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you over Zoom, but it's
Yes.
nice to meet you. Lee Trishelli, school committee. I'm in my second term. Mama 3 here in Plymouth, raising 3 kids in the school system. And I look forward to hearing more.
Very good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Dr. Sorensen.
Hi, Eric. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Chairman of
again.
the school committee. I've been on the school committee a very long time. My sons and my grandsons have all gone through the district, so we're looking forward to your interview.
Very good.
Ian Vedna.
Hello, Eric.
Hi. How are you?
My name is Vedna. I'm one of the newer members of the school committee. I've been a resident of Plymouth for probably 10 years, and I also have a young son who's in elementary school in Plymouth schools. It is nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And we have Kim Hunt, who just joined us as well. I think, Kim, you're muted. I apologize.
Hi, guys. I'm so sorry. I've been working and I lost track of, I didn't realize it was this late. The sun's still out.
That happened.
Guys, I'm Kim Savy Hunt. I've been on the school committee for about 7 years now, I think. And I'm happy to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Is that Charmin? Is that Charmin behind you?
Oh,
Because
I
we're
forgot
out.
to take that off. Oh, sorry. That was for my work.
I was going to say, send some to Georgia.
I should have taken that off. I'm sorry. See, I'm just totally off today. I apologize.
You're fine.
My Tiger King on.
Okay. All right. So now that you've met everyone, we do have one more member, Eric, that may be joining, but
Mrs.
Margie
Burgess.
and
Mhm.
yes, Mrs. Burgess. So, but right now we're going to, in the essence of time, we have about an hour for you tonight.
Okay.
With the committee, we'll be asking you 11 questions. And as I shared with you on the phone, we'll, in a few minutes, if you can just give us an opener why you're interested in the position, a little bit about your background. And at the end, you'll have an opportunity for any closing remarks. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you for your opening.
Very good. Well, thank you. It's nice to see some of you again. I'm in my 25th year in education. I've spent the last 15 years as high school principal in 2 different systems. My experience has led me to this final opportunity, which is to pursue a leadership position within the entire school system, such as superintendent. I feel as a high school principal, it's given me the training ground to be successful. I was immediately attracted to your areas. We have family that is in that vicinity, as well as I was born in Boston and grew up in Halifax until my parents were transferred in the 3rd grade. But I've always tried to work my way back. Out of college, I was sports medicine major and played college baseball, and we used to go down to Fort Myers, Florida. So when I graduated out of Buffalo, New York, I was ready for a change in climate. So I went to Fort Myers and ended up staying 15 years, working as a classroom teacher, coach. Then I worked my way into administrative positions. I was one of the youngest principals in South Florida when I took over Mariner High School back in 2005. After spending 15 years there, I was ready to raise my daughters in a smaller community, more family-friendly environment for them. And we happened to come across the North Georgia Mountains small school system, very similar as far as maybe not necessarily in size as Plymouth, but a very tourist area. We have some wonderful families that live here and work here, and their students have come through the school system. And I've been at this post for the last 11 years. I was the first high school principal hired outside this county. And I've been able to almost integrate straight into it early on. And I was very fortunate and a lot of support. And we've turned this school around to a school that is one of the systems that other surrounding systems look to. We're very proud of the accomplishments that we've made here in the last 11 years. As we're working to work our way back up to New England, where we have family in Mattapoisett, Martha's Vineyard, Bristol, Rhode Island, Plymouth was a spot that kind of stood out to me, especially when I reviewed your superintendent search process, the detail you put into it, the forums, the surveys, the results, how it was all kind of just put together. I felt like, wow, this system was speaking to me, and I just felt like I needed to take that opportunity to apply. And I've been very fortunate that I made it through the screening process and through the first round. So I'm here. I might look a little red today. We did 75 mini graduation ceremonies today. Our graduation is very soon upon us, May 22nd. Our county has not been hit as bad as other counties in our area. We've had 33 confirmed cases, so I've been able to work with our public health department, law enforcement, our EMS, our attorneys, and we feel like we're going to be able to do a modified traditional ceremony on May 22nd, which would allow each graduate to invite 2 guests, which we know today's age is very difficult because we have a lot of split and blended families. So instead of just having students be able to identify only 2 individuals, we are spending the next 3 days, over 30 hours, to honor and recognize each high school student and up to 15 guests. And so we were out there. It was a beautiful day, 60, but we had a lot of wind. So I don't know if I'm sunburnt or windburnt, but it was a special moment today for our students. We started at 7 a.m. and went all the way to 4 o'clock today. So we've got another couple busy days with that. But that's a little bit about me as to why I've come this far, in our hopes to settling my family for the next 12 to 15 years up in the Plymouth area.
Thank you, Eric. Our first question will now go over to Ms. Haywood. Edna.
Hello. Can you just pronounce your last name for me, please?
Yes, it's Shofi.
Shofi. Okay.
Just like it looks, right?
Not
at all.
Not at all. So, Mr. Shofi, a superintendent's core values are critical to the quality of leadership that he brings to a community. Briefly tell us what values most inform your work as a school system's primary leader. Give us examples of the significant leadership decisions that have been made that have been informed by these values.
The number one core value I've utilized in each of my stops has been the safety aspect, the safe learning environment. I do not believe that you can have constant instruction moving forward if students and staff do not feel safe. Now, safe has changed, from back in the early 2000s to what we're dealing with safety today. But I have implemented programs to help support a safe learning environment, a positive behavior intervention support program, which rewards students for making the good decisions that sometimes go unnoticed because we a lot of times focus our attention in the school level on those that are making the poor expectations or poor decisions. Another program that we've implemented with success is Habitudes, which really talks about the character building, which for me is critical. Our goal each year is to graduate students that are prepared to go out into the real world. And we talk a lot about legacy and character and how does that define you and what does that mean for you as an individual. So we've used that program quite a bit. You know, the first chapter in Habitudes talks about the iceberg. We're all familiar with the Titanic and the iceberg, and you see 10% of that iceberg. And as you're traveling, and when you see students, you just see the surface. And 90% of what goes on with every individual is underneath that surface. And that's really what Habitudes targets. It's looking beyond what you see, it's what's underneath. And I think students today have a lot more underneath that we're working towards exposing and trying to support. So those are two programs that we have implemented in both school systems that I've been at. And I feel like it's really kind of targeted that safe learning environment aspect. Student achievement cannot improve if you're not working in that type of environment. And that's good for students, staff, parents, visitors, you know, anybody within that school community has to believe and understand that. And I think one of the things that I have brought into my experiences is I spend a lot of time explaining how that works and talking about, I'm sure you guys have been hit, we've been hit with vaping, you know, these things that students are dealing with that has been put out there to advertise to our youth. And we have to educate and kind of make sure that all of our students are aware of the dangers and the support systems that they have in place. So that kind of gives you a little bit of my expectations. I've never asked anybody to do something I'm not willing to do myself. Surviving 11 years as a high school principal in one town, I couldn't have done that if I wasn't consistent and fair. And when I was hired, I even made the statement that if a school board member's child violates the expectations of the school, they'll be disciplined just like any other student. And we have done that. And not everybody agrees with every decision a high school principal makes, but one thing they will say is, I've always treated every student fairly, and I've been very consistent with those decisions.
Thank you, Eric. We'll now go over to Michelle for question number 2.
All right, so educators often talk about putting students first as the focus of what they do. Please tell us how you put students first as an instructional leader with specific examples.
Getting to know your students. That's how they know they're first. I used to believe this in the classroom. Every student that I came across always thought that they were my favorite student. Everybody thought that they were Mr. Shofi's favorite. And as an administrator, I've always been blessed that I've been, you know, voted as, you know, most popular administrator, even though I was a lot of times a disciplinarian. I think letting students know it doesn't matter what program they're being serviced by. It's going to individual classroom programs. It's going to Special Olympics. It's going down to the health classroom when they have the dreaded STD talk. It's the students seeing you in there. You know, I actually intentionally would go down there when my daughters were in there. So when they did the no kiss conversation, so the kids could raise their hands and I could, you know, just let them know that we're there always. I think students, they're very impressionable. And a lot of times, when you get to know the background of a lot of our students, we know that as educators, we are sometimes the most positive role model they have in their lives. And that's not the case in every single household, obviously. And there's a lot of great support within the families, but getting to know and building those relationships with students, I think is important. I can give you an example of a relationship right now. I had a student whose father passed away 1.5 years ago. His mom has not been able to take him and teach him how to drive. So on Saturdays for the past 2 months, I've been giving him driving lessons. I was certified in the state of Florida, so it wasn't just a whim. But getting to know the individual, you know, challenges students face, I think is one of my strengths. Getting to know the staff, you got to be able to have an open door policy and really truly mean it. And I think the students would tell you that if there was ever an issue or a concern of theirs, they've emailed me. I've gotten text messages tonight because the graduation practice is tomorrow. Families are, you know, constantly in communication, which to me is key. You know, you have to communicate out. I often say in education, I never thought I'd be a salesman, but here's what I know. If we don't brand our school system as the leaders in our school system, someone else is going to brand it for us. And we don't want those that are disgruntled, upset, or whatever it might be the ones that are telling the story of your school system. And that's one thing I've been impressed is these last couple months reviewing your school system, whether you're using your Voyager Express, your EDTV, whatever that you're using, your ways to communicate out, you guys are telling a great story. And so that helps when you have things such as the pandemic. People believe in you, trust in you. And that's what I feel like we have done here as well. And then I'd like to help translate and move forward in the years to come.
Thank you. Question number 3 goes to Mr. Morgan.
Yes, hi. I was kind of drawn to number 3 because I'm a former town meeting member and a finance committee member. So the representative town meeting model is valued in Plymouth. As a leader of the school district, what do you view as your role in the process, and how would you convince the community of our needs in this form and beyond?
I absolutely got to be hands-on. You have to understand where the money's coming from, where the support is coming from. Although I'm coming out of a different state, there's different guidelines, different funding sources, whether it's state, federal, local. It's our goal to make sure that we know what programs we have, what programs need to be supported, and then how we're going to deal with what we're going to all be dealing with next school year, which is going to be some cutbacks, whether it be from the state level, local level, federal. We still have all these programs that we're wanting to implement. So we're going to have to sit down and really get to work and figure out, if we had renovation projects or capital outlay projects, what is it that we truly need and what do we want? When it comes to programs, which programs are going to impact the most of our students that we can? And that's going to be a challenge, because when I look at the programs that you guys have put in place for at-risk, those are wonderful programs. Every one of those programs come with a cost. You hope that you're not eliminating any of those programs. You're going to have to look at class size. 80% of your budget, operating budget, is going to be personnel. What is our average class size numbers? Where are areas that we can cut so we can make it through? I read one article recently where furlough days was not been identified in the school system, but it looked like in other entities within the Plymouth community. Is that going to be something that's going to be laid out there? What school start time is going to look like? How are we going to be able to fund digital learning? There are so many of the unknowns. I know in February, a 2021 budget was worked on and presented. How's that going to change? What do we know is going to be eliminated as far as the amount of money? So I think getting involved in the town meetings, it is structured differently in Georgia. There's a learning curve, obviously. But I know that there's people within your system on the school committee that have been through that are very familiar with the day-to-day operations. And sometimes in a situation like this, it might be good to have somebody with an outside perspective and ask the questions that maybe hadn't been asked recently. And those are the things that when I started looking at the finances for Plymouth, it's a healthy budget, which makes you fortunate to do a lot of things. But I've also noticed in the last about 11, 12 years, there's been a decline in enrollment. So there's FTE shortfalls there. And so there's a lot of things that are going to go into play that needs to get a lot of attention pretty quickly. And hopefully there'll be some answers locally and state level so you can start preparing for what the fall is going to look like, because that is a major unknown at this point. So we're all kind of in that same situation on how we're going to handle things. One of the biggest revenue sources we have is a penny sales tax that's spent in our county. We have a very one of the top 8 wealthy counties in the state of Georgia, but our sales tax that we get 1 cent on every dollar has been impacted the last couple months. So what is that going to do for us? So I imagine there's going to be similar things, maybe a little bit structured differently, but things that we definitely have to have a lot of hard conversations. That's for sure.
Thank you, Eric. Turn it over to Dr. Sorensen.
Eric, actually, this question is probably a continuation of your previous answer, but I'm going to take you in a sort of more specific direction then. Putting aside COVID responses and needs, what do you consider is the next crisis facing public education? Now, you've just talked about financial matters, and you can address that in your answer, but I'd like really to know what would be your preparatory steps in anticipating this next crisis.
I think one of the biggest crises we've dealt with prior to COVID-19 was the social emotional health of our teenagers and students in general. And I think that's going to be intensified. So I think that is going to need a lot of support and attention. Our students here, your students in Plymouth, their families are impacted with the economy, with their jobs, with everything that they're doing day to day. And if our kids have that depression and anxiety signs and symptoms prior to March 16th for you all, it's going to need a lot of attention. What's that going to look like? I'm going to know a lot about what's happening in the community as far as the supports available. That's one of the negatives where I'm currently located in a rural school system in North Georgia. We don't have the resources to reach out in the community, and that's where I'm hoping the community is able to come together and have the resources available to support the students. I think that's going to be critical. I think providing that support and leadership for not only our students but our families that attend the Plymouth Public Schools. I worry about digital learning. I worry about the technology age. I think it's been something that has presented itself years back. What a great tool. But I've also seen the impact of that with students, with their, it's great to be able to plug something into a computer and get an answer quickly. It's another thing to have it being all consuming all hours of the night. And I know as parents, it's easier when you're dealing with teenagers to just not battle it. But I think it's putting our students at a disadvantage. I think there's going to need, hello, Dr. Burgess.
I'm trying to.
Ms. Burgess.
I'm trying to get
faces popping, come and go. That's the hard part. So I think those two things are going to be areas financially that we're going to have to work on to make sure that those things are in place. You don't want to have the at-risk student become more and more frequent. As far as the funding that's been assigned in those areas, I think that needs to be preserved. One of the areas that I know we have seen grow is just students with 504 accommodations. And they have I think Patty's on it.
Okay. Sorry, Patty was a Spanish teacher, not a technology
Now I
teacher.
can hear for the first time. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So Eric, just to say, this is Margie, who's with us tonight, who you met in the prior interview. So we're going to keep going with our questions. So I will now move over to Kim Hunt.
Kim,
we got to unmute you yet.
I know.
Challenges of Zoom.
Took me a minute to. All right. So, what would you do to maintain teacher morale and to support teachers, even in the face of other pressures such as budget constraints, state mandates, and increased testing and standards?
It's a good question. Knowing the climate of your building, I call it every now and then I take the temperature of the building, and you have those staff members that are going to tell you what you want to hear. There's going to be those that avoid you, and then there's those that are going to be real. If you're invested in what they're doing and you know with them, and I talked about relationships earlier with students, staff is no different. Right now we're doing departmental meetings. We're meeting with whole staff department, like staff meetings on Google Meets. Once they see your face, they feel relieved. The words that you say, just a simple teacher appreciation week. Not only are we
No matter what, I can't hear.
all of their work. When you look at for us, teacher appreciation, it's not just coming from myself. We use our whole leadership team, and we try to staircase things out. And we want them to know the challenges they're facing, the impact that they're having on students, and sharing stories. I think that makes them feel valued, that you know what's going on in their classroom. It's one thing for me to go in and do an observation. I can see something in 5 minutes, but I'm not truly in there the whole time. So when I go into the classroom, I've got to see, obviously, instruction and the safety element of the classroom, but then having that conversation afterwards, talking them through it, having those conversations. And I think that allows
I
me.
still can't hear no matter what you do.
Peg is our professional here at all this, so she's going to work it through. We'll just give you 1 minute. We won't take this against your time allotment either. So, okay. I think what we'll do, Eric, is have you, anything else you wanted to say on that question? And then I know we're working through the muting issue and the hearing. I guess Margie can't hear you for some reason. So,
well, I wanted to give one good example of teacher morale. We did a on-site professional learning activity where we brought in an expert to help train our staff on best practices. And I had a teacher who was concerned with the delivery style of the educator we brought in, and so much that she didn't want to attend. Well, I said, well, this is a school-wide initiative. We can't pick and choose what we want to go to. But if you're uncomfortable, I need to value that. And I need to understand, why are you uncomfortable? Because her perception could have been different than what was going on in there. So I sat in the next professional learning individual session with her. And just knowing that I was sitting with her put her completely at ease. She was a big supporter of mine, but I know after that moment, if I asked her to move her classroom up on the 3rd floor, and we don't even have a 3rd floor, she would have done it. She just definitely felt like she was the most important teacher in the building when I took that time with her. And I think that's a lot of what we have to do with our teachers now. As superintendent, you have to lead and guide the other members of the leadership team, the school level administration, because that would be a very challenging task to be able to get to know every single teacher within the large scope of things at 13 schools, 600 plus staff members. I mean, it's probably more than that. It would definitely be something that you work on with your immediate leadership team and school leadership team.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll now move on to Lee, the next question.
Mr. Shofi, can you define the role of the superintendent and the role of the school committee as you see it? Also, please describe how you would keep the school committee informed between meetings.
Well, as a superintendent, for me, there's always been 2 roles. One, you're working as a secretary to the school committee. You're keeping that dialogue open, and you're enforcing the policies that are developed within the school committee, and work on those core beliefs and those core goals that you have established. Part of the strategic plan is coming to a conclusion. So then there's going to be a lot of time working with that school committee. My previous experience has been working individually with board members on different topics with the high school. As superintendent, I would think that there would be conversations when there comes something critical that happens with any school level, if it impacts a student or staff member. If there's a major policy that is being challenged within the school, or if there's anything that I felt like you as a school committee member would be getting contacted from the greater at large. You're not going to be, I'm not going to tie up your day because a student is being had a discipline consequence. Now, if that student brought a weapon to school, or if there was a major incident that caused bodily harm, obviously, those are something that you need to be made aware of. So I think as my job as superintendent would be, I kind of touched on this a little bit, that branding of the school system, making sure the community and all of the support places that provide to the school system are aware of the things that are happening in each of the schools. And then as a school committee, you're representing the community. So, getting that input from each of you to know what it is that needs to be targeted, it's obviously established in our strategic plan. And everything that we do is going to connect to your currently student achievement.
I
All
can't hear
students
a
can
thing.
learn. It has to do with building
Can't hear
leadership
a thing.
capacity, retaining and all staff,
Huh?
highly qualified staff members. The social emotional wellness of students are going to be critical for us to be successful. And then obviously working on policies if they need to be updated. And I imagine a lot of policies across the country are going to be updated with this latest pandemic and things that we're going to have to look at. Attendance, that's always been a big target of mine. And what's attendance going to look like? We know what it's going to look like currently, but what's it going to look like in the fall? When I was looking at the attendance numbers in Plymouth, it was 30% of the students were missing 10 or more days of school. How are we going to address that if it's going to increase? So those are the policy type things I think that we would have to sit down and look at and kind of brainstorm.
Okay. Hi, great job. So I was just talking to Margie, and she can't hear us, but she's going to still ask her question, and it works out well because she's the next question. So I'm going to wave to Margie, and then she's going to be able to watch the video because we have this recorded, which is great. So I think it might be a speaker issue. So Margie, I'm waving to you, and you can ask. We got Peg, if you unmute Margie for this, and we can hear her. Oh, unmute. There we go.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? All right. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Due to the recent COVID-19 crisis, in addition to other financial concerns, the school committee is under pressure to contain the school operating budget. In addition, our school-age population has declined, yet our students' needs are increasing. Despite these circumstances, if you believed program improvements and/or additional staff were necessary, how would you approach budgeting for those improvements under these difficult circumstances?
That statement, we're all going to try and figure out, no matter where you're at in the country. Because especially when I mentioned earlier, looking at the enrollment numbers, and when you look at the enrollment numbers, so I've seen about 1,000 student body decline in the last 12 years, but has also seen a rise in the special needs student population in the community, gone from 16% up to 20% this past year. And that doesn't include 504s, which a lot of students are receiving 504s because of depression, anxiety. We had a big rash of food allergens that we're dealing with. So there's more and more needs that are occurring within our student body. How are we going to address that? Your foundation has been laid. The support programs you have already in place to target students is there. The question is, how do you maintain it? That's where, when you start looking at attrition, you start looking at class size. What are the areas that can impact the entire system so that you can maintain programs for all students? I also noticed in the last 12 years, your ELL population, that was one of the questions that was brought up in the first round. There were only 41 students back in 2000, I believe it was 2008, that were ELL students. Now you're at 186. So population is declining, but our needs are growing. And that's not going to be an easy solution. I mean, you're going to need people with familiarity with the community. You're going to need those in the district leadership, the school level, that are all coming together to figure out what is in the best interest and that can impact as many students as we can. Although the numbers are changing, one thing that obviously I believe Plymouth will be very proud of is the graduation rate has grown by 10% in the last 12 years. That's amazing. That's outstanding. Your dropout rate has lowered. I think there were 66 kids back in 2008 that were considered dropout, and only 17 this past year. So you're targeting and you're identifying and you're supporting. And we have to maintain that integrity so that every student that walks through any one of the schools in the Plymouth public school system has a chance to graduate and be successful after high school. That's ultimately what all of our goals are. We want our students to achieve. We want them to dream big. We want them to build character, and we want them to be successful. We want them to have a better life than we have had. And that's something I've told my own kids. I want them to have a better life than I had growing up. And that's something that I think we need to instill on every student that walks through the doors at any school in Plymouth.
Thank you. We're going to now go to Vedna for number 8.
All right. How important do you feel it is for the superintendent to be visible throughout the community? How will you determine where to be and how to be present in our schools, at events, and in the community at large?
As a high school principal, the second part of my day starts after school. And it's almost 2 jobs, because whether you're on the football program or in the chorus or on esports, students love it when you come and see them perform. It's a proud moment. My principal was there. Mr. Shofi came. And I know that. And, I also have a family. Well, my family grows up at the high school. My older kids have been coming with me since they were, learning to walk. And now my son and daughter, who are 3 and 4, are the same way. They're here all the time. We were just walking through our neighborhood, and one of the neighbors yelled out, "Hi to Easton." And he's like, "How do you know my name?" I said, "Because Easton, you go to every event that we have." So I think it's important. Now, obviously, I've managed one high school, and so I would have to be to keep a calendar. I would rely on the school leadership to let me know of when certain events are coming up that would allow me to be able to go and see as many different events as that I could within a given calendar year. I think knowing on the other side who to target in the community, as you mentioned early on, we had a term down here: who are the movers and the shakers? Who do you need to know? Who do you need to sell the school system to? Who's not believing in what you're doing? I'm lacking that knowledge. I won't know that coming in. I would rely on those around me to help guide me in that. I feel like I have the presence and the comfort to go in and talk to the group. I just need to be directed in which group needs the focal point. It goes back to selling, our system. It goes into, letting the community know what's happening. What are the successes? You can't ignore the challenges. That's part of who we are. We have to identify them. We can't hide them. You don't want to ever be accused of sweeping things under the rug. Very transparent, I think, is critical. And I think being transparent has allowed me to keep the tenure that I've had within both school systems I've worked. I take responsibility for those things that might go wrong, and I give credit to those around me when things go well. I think that's, your job as a superintendent. People sometimes they'll start leapfrogging and going around certain process that you might have in place. And I think just kind of making sure you're all working together, you're having the same common language, I think helps support what's happening at each of the schools within the system.
Thank you. We'll now turn back over to Dr. Sorensen. You just need to unmute, Jim. We can. There we go.
Eric, what are some of the most common missteps of a superintendent, and how can they be avoided?
One of the things I've used with my own administrative team is you have to make decisions with your head and not your heart. Sometimes we get caught up in the emotional part. We have to see all facets of it. We have to work through the challenges of any given circumstance. You can't hear something and just go off and run. You have to gather. You have to analyze. You have to break it down. You have to have conversation. You have to rely on the people around you. You don't want to get caught following what we call a rabbit hole, and it starts branching off. You want to know what the situation is, what's the impact, what has been done, what can be done better, and then have those conversations. A lot of times we hear the first side or the first part of the story, and we don't want to be in a situation where that's the only story. And so I think gathering and getting input is going to be critical for that. And you have to make decisions. You have to keep the school committee involved on major topics that come up, working with each individual school leadership, and then working our way down to find the root cause of whatever the situation might be.
Thank you. We're now going to turn it over to Michelle Badger.
Sorry, my space bar sometimes doesn't work. What are your thoughts on how we improve communication with families and in turn, how we can increase family engagement in our schools?
I don't know if you guys use Title I dollars for parent liaisons, but I've seen that work extremely well with Title I schools. Having someone dedicated to being that liaison, because there's a lot of families that are just intimidated by the thought of having to deal with the school. So if you can have someone that's kind of geared towards a position that's their sole purpose, I've seen that work just extremely well in the K-8 schools that we have here. The problem with communication, we think we're communicating extremely well right now during our current situation, digital learning. But then there will be parents who will say, well, I don't use Facebook. I don't follow Twitter. I can't get access to internet, so I can't get on your website. We have our own radio station. I can't get the FM station. We can't send a letter home on everything. And we have what we call alert nows, where we can do an automated call out. And so we'll do that and we'll send it, but then parents have to listen to it. And sometimes it's training our parents to understand the information coming home. And sometimes it gets overwhelming because we speak a common language. A lot of our families don't know that language. And when they don't know something, it's easier to just hang up the phone or put that letter from the school in the mail, in the trash, and I'll just act as if I didn't get it. And then they want to complain that they didn't know. I think hosting open houses, those types of things are pretty traditional. One of the things that I've seen that has worked well within the community is doing a lot of literacy nights. That's been a big target for us in our school system. A superhero night, a Harry Potter night. It gets kids excited and it draws the parents in. Once you get the parents in, we can have a little section over here talking about parent involvement and, kind of gather information while the fun stuff's going on with some of the students. So I've seen that work successfully. Probably the biggest impact program, and I know I'm at the high school level, but one of the things that has always concerned me was the literacy coming into the high school in the 9th grade. And we felt we need to target early childhood, not just pre-K, but birth to 5. So we started a charge at the high school with our curriculum director, and we started a book going home with every new parent that had a birth within one of our local hospitals. And we went out to our pediatricians, our health department, and people saw us everywhere, the school system, so that by the time they came to 5 years old coming into kindergarten, they weren't intimidated by the school system. They saw us as a major resource. So that has been now we won't see the net result of that. We started it 3 years ago. So, it's going to be a while before you start seeing the impact. But now we have families asking, oh, my child's turned 1. Where's our books at? What can we do? And I used our driver's ed class to deliver books to the different areas. So they got to be a part of it, and our literacy team here at the high school. So I think it just needs to become a school community effort. It's not cheap. There are grants, and that's what we were awarded. So we were able to do that. And the lady that helped me push this was my English teacher, who became our literacy coach, who's now a director of curriculum instruction in our school system. So it's just been a way to get families involved at an early age. By the time they get to high school, they're focused on what their child's involved in. If they play football, they might be in a booster club. If they're in band, they might be working with the band. But we need to get them involved early on.
Okay, thank you. And Eric, rest assured, I've talked to Margie and she's gonna be able to watch all this tomorrow with the sound
Very
too.
good.
We've connected, so.
Sounds good.
By the way, you can hear me,
There she
but I
is.
can hear you. I
Yep.
can hear you now. I went into my
Oh.
settings on my phone and for some reason I was on mute.
Oh,
So
might
on
have
my sound, that just happened automatically. I didn't-
oh, perfect. Well, now you can hear. That's
I
fabulous,
can hear,
Margie.
but it was a spread at the end.
Okay,
But I'll listen
Okey
tomorrow
doke.
night. Yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
All right, we're gonna move on to, in all our job descriptions in Plymouth, we have sense of humor. So that's something we all have.
It's very
So,
important.
yep. So we'll now move on to Mr. Morgan with number 11.
Given the current financial climate, what types of creative ideas might you suggest to meet the educational needs of our student not being met within the regular budget and program?
The individual programs at the schools, how our special needs students are being met, is it an inclusion model? Is it a resource model? Are we challenging students? Where's that funding look like? In our AP classes, advanced placement classes, what's our number of students? The testing, do students pay for the AP tests in Plymouth? Currently, I pay for all AP tests here at the high school. Is dual enrollment an option for students where they're taking college level classes? That's not something I'm familiar with, and I would certainly want to make sure that that's something that could be available. Higher education. Working for the needs of the students is a huge scope. One thing I think is a very realistic conversation to be having because we're going to have to take guidance from those above anybody within the individual school systems is what's the state of athletics going to look like come fall? What are the fields and the cost of transportation for athletics and officials? What is it even going to look like? What is social distancing going to look like going into next school year? I know it's not a direct answer because we don't know what that's going to look like. And I think we have to be of the mindset of how are we going to respond? I've always tried to be proactive and not reactive. But in a situation that we're dealing with where there's so many unknowns and so many states are at so many different levels and every county within the states at a different exposure level, we almost have to react once we know what the ultimate is. It a $2 million shortfall? Is it a $10 million shortfall? That's going to impact the decisions that are made. What is the community willing to be able to do to offset any of those shortfalls that might come from the state and federal level? And to tell you a creative plan, we're having conversations here. What's it going to look like in a classroom, in the lunchroom, at a football game? We don't know yet because we don't know what the guidelines are going to be. And I think as educators, being a government agency, we have to be very mindful of following some of those guidelines, and we're going to have challenges. Absolutely. Knowing, I think the budget was 104 million. I saw was right around that area for next school year. What is that 104 million going to look like next month? And unfortunately, I don't know as if anybody has that answer yet because we're still kind of wading through trying to figure it all out. So I wish I could give you a better answer. It's not anything that I've ever experienced in 25 years. We've had different impacts through natural disasters, through hurricanes, where we knew if we lost a school in South Florida where I was at, we knew money was going to have to go to that community. Something like this is just so wide. It just grips an entire community, and it's hard because we just don't know.
Patty, it didn't come up in any one of Eric's answers, so I want to just throw out one more question to him.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us your experience in the development of the budget?
I've had different levels within the schools that I've been at. I've been responsible for putting our personnel, which is always going to be your largest portion. So for me, when I've had a $6 million budget down in Florida, it was 80% towards personnel. Then it was a breakdown of our transportation, our athletics, our title funds, our special needs funds, the different grants that we receive. One of our local funds here that I've been able to use for technology grants and writing grants, helps offset cost. I've been pretty fortunate, the big bills, the utilities and those things have always been paid at the district level just based on an average monthly that we have here at the school. So we've had to be mindful on how we utilize that. I think one of the biggest cost savings we're going to have is I think a lot of our schools in the state of Georgia and our counties are probably going to look towards moving our school year to start after Labor Day. That's a direction our system seemed to go in, which then has a huge cost savings for us in the South with our utility bills. But for me, the biggest operating thing I've had is managing the personnel budget, making sure the class sizes are being met. Funding is going towards whether it's instructional, parapro, administrative support, our athletic budget, our performing and fine arts budget, departmental budgets, textbooks, and those types of things. The technology one's been a big thing lately.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So Eric, that closes our official questions. I didn't know if you had any questions for the group before we move into any closing remarks, if you wanted to ask anyone anything.
Well, and this could be a lot of conversations been about budget. Has there been any temporary or anything shared with the school committee as potential shortfalls that you guys are anticipating, or has that been broached yet?
I can speak to that just on currently, and I'm sure Dr. Sorensen may add something. We've been asked to participate in an exercise to review potential budget cuts for next year that we'll be sharing with the school committee and then ultimately the selectmen in Plymouth, based on certain figures. So Dr. Maestas is working with his administrative team to provide two options essentially, and those will be shared with the school committee and go from there. So Dr. Sorensen, I don't know if that you wanted to add.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. And the only thing I would throw into it is that we're turning back over $2 million this year of money not spent.
Okay. And then with the strategic plan coming to a conclusion, is that I'm assuming there's already been a lot of conversations or review of the data to see if we're going to continue in the direction of the current strategic plan, or has there been areas that have already been targeted for the next cycle?
The strategic plan subcommittee has been working diligently for months now, and they're developing the follow-up document.
Yeah, I believe a survey will be going out shortly to stakeholders, and so that's something that started again right before the pandemic, I believe, I think, but it's continuing.
Has there been a lot of conversation in Massachusetts about the fall? I feel like most places have gotten their heads around how we're going to finish the school year. Whether it's, the disbelief and the sadness from our seniors that are on their way out, to what is it actually starting to look like or preparing ourselves for in the fall, whether we're continuing on with digital learning, or are we looking at modified? Has there been conversations at the state level on what that's going to start to look like?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, we're not getting any, at least maybe other committee members know more than I, but I don't see any guidance coming down from the state at this point. Kim, go ahead.
I was on a statewide school committee call with the Commissioner of Ed a couple weeks ago, and pretty much all we were told is that he's gathering every case scenario and he's just making multiple scenarios depending on what happens. If they do social distancing, the schools will be overcrowded and they might have to do 1 week on, 1 week off digital learning. I mean, that's going to affect our budget as well, because you're going to have to do double duty. But from what I understand, and Dr. Sorensen is correct, we haven't got a lot of information, but what the message that I was delivered was that, unlike when this happened, we have time. And before we had to kind of think on our feet. And now what they're doing is they're working up, exploring every opportunity and making up multiple scenarios to see what's happened. But that's about all that we got. I don't know if
I was just going to say, I know in the district we have a safety committee meeting that's tomorrow morning, and we're going to start talking about that piece. And then there's going to be another committee that's established off of that to kind of think about the different ways in which we could start, what it might look like. So we'll have a lot of different plans in place at some
The
point.
reentry plan.
Exactly.
Several
Thank
reentry
you for my
plans.
word.
Yeah, that's good because I work for Kumon, which is a educational, and we just made a reentry toolkit, a reentry guidebook. And again, we don't know what it's frozen, I think.
Yeah, I think the big information, the governor is supposed to come out. He came out with something today, but I know speaking with our local union officials and our staff that his message that comes out on what the reopening plan of his estate is going to be one of the first pieces that guide us. And I think, as Michelle said, that safety committee is going to start to look at things like HR, transportation, curriculum, kind of look at the big pieces, are we staffing, our student needs, our family needs. So we're just starting the conversation, but we all need to have.
Has there been any determination on essential and non-essential personnel within the school system? Is everybody considered essential at this point still moving forward, or have they already started breaking that down?
Right now, our essential in our district is our administrators and our clerical staff and our custodial staff. We're working modified shifts, and most people are working remotely from home. So everyone is documented what they're doing, but we're kind of doing a soft opening where administrators are in the building, custodians are in the building, secretaries, based on their particular needs and things of that nature, on a modified schedule, if that makes sense, for the physical presence. But then when they leave, they do remote work from home. And some people are fully working from home. So it's all over the map, I guess.
Okay. But everybody's having an opportunity to stay employed.
Yes.
Good.
Eric, you certainly can appreciate we're trying to schedule 2 high schools remotely.
Yes.
It's something.
It is. And
yes.
I wish you guys nothing but the best during that.
Absolutely.
It's hard.
Okay. So I think, Eric, now any closing remarks you have for us, and thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties throughout.
Absolutely. For me, opportunity, I've always taken advantage of every opportunity I've had. Every assignment I've earned, the school and the school system has been better since I was a part of it. I've been very fortunate that I've had very strong staffs. It took me 11 years to get to the staff where we are today. And I believe that can happen in Plymouth for me to get the opportunity. I know you have strong candidates within your school system. It's just something that I'm hoping that at this point, you guys are looking for somebody who might come in with some different ideas in how to manage a school system. Next year is going to be a challenge. Absolutely. I've gone through the process to transfer my certificate. I started early March. My test, it's not a reciprocity state, has been delayed every month. Now it's most recently scheduled for July 22nd. So I'll have everything in place as soon as the doors and the computer allows it to occur. So I just want to make sure you guys knew that I am working towards that. My family are definitely relocating. We are excited about being up in that area. I think it just comes down to opportunity. I said this in the first interview. I've always strived for perfection. I expect that out of a staff I work with. I know perfection is unattainable, but when you put your mind to that, then excellence occurs. And that is something I believe all the students that enter Plymouth Public Schools should have the opportunity for, is excellence. And I think once they achieve that, then we know that they are able to leave our doors and have productive lives and hopefully give back to the community in which that they went to school.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there's anything else from the committee, but we'll probably close with that. It was great to see you again, Eric, and I will be in touch, as I have been, with next steps in the process, and we'll go from there. I don't know if anyone had anything else they wanted to say, or we just close.
Just thank you. Just thank you.
I appreciate your guys' time. I really do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Best of luck.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. There he is. Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, Patty. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I share with the committee we were not going to do introductions of,
Okay.
you know, everyone, if you're okay with that. But just to begin, thanks for being here with us on Zoom. And as you know, our evening tonight, we're going to ask you in a few minutes to give a brief introduction about why you're interested in the position, a little bit about your background. We have about 11 questions for you that everyone's going to ask you. And we have about 60 minutes. And then at the end, if you have any questions, and then any closing remarks. So that's our process. And at this point, I will turn it over to you for your brief introduction to the group.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And for our Mother's Day, happy belated Mother's Day to all the moms. I hope you had a nice day yesterday. I just want to thank you for this opportunity this evening. I only wish that we were actually physically there together, but I'm glad that and appreciative that you're moving forward with this process, because it's really important that we continue to move forward despite the fact that we can't do this together. So for those in the public that may not know me, because I understand that this will be televised at some point, I want to just introduce myself. So my name is Chris Campbell. I've had the great pleasure of serving as Assistant Superintendent for Plymouth for 12 years now. I'm a resident of Plymouth, 21 years today, in fact, actually, 21 years ago today, May 11th. Excuse me. I have 3 children, all students of the Plymouth Public Schools. My son is a recent graduate, and I have 2 girls at Plymouth North High School, a freshman and a junior. While a few of you already have heard this story, and I apologize for those who were a part of the initial interview, but I feel it's important that I once again share a little bit about this story about myself to the rest of this committee, as well as to the public that may not know this, and it really explains a lot about who I am and why I got into education. So growing up, my family, we struggled. Our family lived paycheck to paycheck for, as long as I can really remember. My mom and my stepfather were very proud people, extremely hard workers. They instilled a work ethic in me and values that really have, shaped me to the person I am today. And I owe them just a gratitude. I am so gracious for the lessons and the role that they played in my life. Great role models. As a teenager, I probably didn't appreciate that as much. My biggest concern was not struggling as much as my family did growing up. I studied really hard in school. I really excelled in math and science. I did everything that I thought that I needed to do in order to shape my life for my future properly. Again, what I thought I needed to do. I was very fortunate to receive a very good scholarship to an engineering school in New York, where I would pursue a degree in in mechanical engineering and mathematics. That was the plan, at least at the beginning. It was in my final term of high school. My school where I went, they offered their students, if their grades were good enough, this opportunity to leave school and enroll in what I would call the equivalent of our senior project program. And as a senior, I was determined to do this as a student, because I was really done at that point with my high school career. I knew what I was doing. I was ready for something else. Much like most seniors, motivation starts dwindling a little bit, and I really wasn't putting time into identifying a place where I could volunteer. But my mom, being the great, role model and lesson that she was, she suggested that I contact this family friend that happened to teach students with disabilities in a program out of Marshfield High School. And at the time, I said to my mother, "There's no way. I just can't see myself doing something like that." And it wasn't in the cards for me. At least I thought. So, but time went on, and it was getting closer and closer to, having to submit the paperwork in order to have this experience. And, my options were limited because I really wasn't doing much myself as a student to really prepare for this. So, I eventually called our family friend, Joan, and she allowed me to assist in her classroom, again, out of Marshfield High School. And that experience changed my entire outlook on my purpose and my trajectory for my professional life, but also my personal life too, and I'll explain that. So in the fall, I left for school in New York, upstate New York, very torn about my future after having just a life-changing experience. After a semester, I decided to leave school, and I came home and I enrolled full-time at school at night while pursuing a degree in elementary and special education. all while working full-time during the day as a paraeducator in a private special education school. I literally worked, from 8 to 4, I believe our day was, Monday through Friday, and then we'd go to school every night. I managed to get my schedule 5 nights a week from 7 to 10 o'clock at night. I'd go home and study, do it all over again. It was a decision that really wasn't supported by a lot of people outside of my parents. They thought that I wasn't doing something. It just wasn't making a good decision for myself. But eventually the critics kind of went away, and after 4 years, of really working hard and putting myself through school, I received my first lead teaching position, where I initially taught profoundly disabled young adults for 2 years before going into public school. And I say that it was a personal connection there too, because eventually I met my wife at that school. So the outcome was really positive all around. It was really great. So I share that story. I repeat that story for those who were on my initial committee, as well as for the public, though, because as educators, we all have stories of what inspired us to go into teaching, and that was my story. But that story also shaped me as a parent. It shaped me as a teacher, and it shaped me as a school leader in everything that I've done. It's helped me to become an advocate for our most vulnerable students and families. It helped me understand really the importance of experiential learning, internships, mentoring. As I said the other night in my interview, education can be a struggle for a lot of kids. But it's through these struggles, hopefully, that we as educators help students learn a little bit more about themselves and guide them into that path of deeper understanding and satisfaction, because that's our job as educators and as administrators. I feel very fortunate to have had great mentors along the way in my 26 years. And these mentors really helped me and encouraged me to take on leadership roles, across those years. My job, hopefully as superintendent, will be to inspire our staff to recognize the leaders within themselves, within their students, and then inspire students to do the same thing. So for those in the, for those who don't have my resume packet in front of them in the community, I have 14 years experience as assistant superintendent, 12 here in Plymouth. I've served as a paraprofessional. I've taught general education, special education. I've served as a special ed director, Title I director, assistant superintendent. So my experience is deep and it's comprehensive. I have an intimate understanding of our schools. I've had the great pleasure of calling Plymouth my home for 21 years, as I said today. My 3 children have been educated in this district since preschool, one of them actually, which has provided me a great appreciation, not only as an administrator, but as a parent for our school district. And I care deeply about this community and its overall well-being. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. And hopefully by the end of our conversation this evening, in this hour, this committee recognizes that you're not going to find another candidate with both the depth of experience and the commitment to this town and to this community. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our first question will be from Vedna.
Good evening, Dr.
I'm going to
Campbell.
write it down because I'm having a hard time hearing.
Okay. All right. So a superintendent's core values are critical to the quality of leadership that he brings to a community. Briefly tell us what values most inform your work as a school system's primary leader. Please give us examples of significant leadership decisions that have been informed by these values.
Sorry, I'm just writing it down. So thank you for that question. So my core values really are centered around students, around family. My core values are centered around, believing in a collective purpose to make a positive difference in the lives of students. I feel as a superintendent, it's my job to help be a part, to shape that, to kind of codify this common vision for the betterment of students. I believe in inclusive practice. As an educator, as I said, with my background and my experiences, I really believe that we have to not only be student-centered, but we have to think about all of our learners, have great appreciation for the background and the interests and in their culture, where they come from. I think, in terms of my background in special education, also for really differentiating the learning that we provide our students and giving everyone an equal seat at the table when it comes to how we provide instruction. And I really value my another thing, if I haven't said it already, is family. And the family and community engagement is critical to the work we do. So in terms of how that shaped me, I think when I think about these things, and also, I think I've done a lot of work around inclusive practice, and I think that, I continue to do that as a leader here in Plymouth. I feel really strongly about, the family and community engagement initiatives, and I've been responsible for a number of things in this district. I'm in the process of actually looking at whether or not we could initiate a family engagement center. As a principal, I was a principal of a school that had 15 languages spoken in it, and I knew that family engagement was a critical part to my success. It's the number one thing, in my opinion. And I work really hard to engage our families through having a welcome wagon program, and this is something that I would like to see us do. What I did as principal is we had 15 languages spoken in our school, and I knew that I needed all of my families to feel connected and welcome in my school. So I started this welcome wagon program with parents to support us, because we couldn't possibly meet all the needs without the support of our entire community. And I started pairing volunteer parents to work with our families to get them to PTA, to get them to school events, to have them, be their supports for parent-teacher conferences. So, my work is really about, when I sum up my core values, it's about inclusivity and connectedness and community. So I feel, that a lot of the things that I've done, both in Dedham for my 13 years there, 12 and a half, I think, actually. But the work that I've done here in Plymouth and would continue to do as superintendent is around community engagement and inclusivity for all learners in all families. Some of the work that I've done recently also around grandparents raising children. We have a lot of them here in Plymouth, and that's something that's really important to me too. It's another population here that is, we're seeing an increase in, and we need to do something about that to make them feel connected. And it's a different way of approaching those families, because they've been out of the parenting game, for lack of a better phrase, for a while, and we need to work on that. We need to find a way to connect those families. So a few years ago, as many of you know, I started working with the Center for Active Living, and I'm on that board there. And I did that it was really an afterthought, or so I was encouraged to do that, but it was because of the work I was doing with the Grandparents Raising Children group, because I see the value in supporting those families. So those are a few examples, Ms. Haywood, that I would give, but my core values and my leadership and the actions that I take really around inclusivity, community engagement, family engagement, and really meeting the needs of all learners and families. And as superintendent, that will be a priority of mine, and certainly be a priority for our entire leadership team.
Great. Thank you, Chris. We now go to Michelle Badger.
Okay, so my question is, educators often talk about putting students first as the focus of what they do. Tell us how you put students first as an instructional leader with specific examples.
How I put students first. Can you repeat the end of that, Michelle? I'm sorry.
Of course. No, you're fine. If you could tell us how you put students first as an instructional leader with specific examples.
Great. So I think that's an excellent question. So I think, when we talk about instruction, we really need to think about student-centered instruction. I mean, that's something certainly my work here in Plymouth has tried to foster. We really need, the stand and deliver approach to education is something that we really can no longer do. It's insufficient. We really need to try to engage our students, not only in the lessons themselves, but in the work we do leading up to the exam, to the lessons. We need to ask them for their opinions. We need to try to engage them in lessons through our curriculum that's going to engage them in something that's meaningful for them. So when I think about the work that I've done here in Plymouth, that I've supported both, as assistant superintendent, but also with, keep in mind that my role is to really work with all administrators. So I don't take credit for everything, but I've been instrumentally involved in a lot of work that we've done in terms of student-centered instruction. Our Small Learning Communities grant years ago, I was instrumental in overseeing and directing the grant side of that, but working with our teachers and our school leaders to really look at student-centered practice. I think some of the work that I did, certainly around senior project and trying to support that, so students have meaningful engagement, engaging opportunities to really connect the curriculum to something that's important to them. I did my whole dissertation on the senior project experience. This is something that's really important to me in terms of, when you talk about putting students first, really making those connections. As I talked about in my opening about, mentorships, internships, all of these things are really important because it allows us to bring the classroom to life and to get students to really connect with something that's meaningful to them and process that through with them in a mentoring way back at school. I've been a great advocate for our advisory program to really give students an opportunity to talk about things that are important to them. I think the work that I've done in terms of mental health, in terms of, students first, that's critical. When you talk about students, their mental health and well-being. So the work that I've done to enhance our mental health programs and to do wraparound services in there. I think the work that I've done in terms of the Naviance program, I brought Naviance to our middle schools and high schools, college career readiness. It allows students to really engage in something that's personal and connection to them and working on, goals around that. I think in terms of putting students first, there's so many things that come to mind. But trying to think of another one that's not at the, I think, supporting the visual and performing arts, for example. I've been a strong advocate for that because I think, we do a lot, we've done a lot. When I first came here, we did a lot around the core academics, and we had a good visual and performing arts program. I think we have a fantastic one now, and I think it's really centered around a lot of student interests and needs, and that's something that I've advocated for in terms of putting students first. So I think, there are a lot of examples of things that I've done as assistant superintendent here, working with our principals, our coordinators and directors, and our students, and meeting with students in focus groups to talk about how their experience has been, whether it's been through, senior project, or it's been through the biomedical program that we've brought in, or, the multitude of programs that we brought in over the years. So I hope that answers your question, but I really try to, everything that I do in terms of my work is really centered around students, and hopefully that I've demonstrated that in terms of my philosophy and when I work with our administrators too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris, now we'll go to Bob Morgan with number 3.
Hello, Dr. Campbell.
Hello there.
My question for you is that as a resident of Plymouth, you may be aware that the representative town meeting model is valued in Plymouth. As the leader of the school district, what would you do as your role in this process, and how would you convince the community of our needs in this forum and beyond?
I'm sorry. I think I have a hearing problem. Can you just repeat that, Bob, the end of that? I'm sorry. How would, as superintendent, how would I?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went a little fast.
No, that's okay.
Plymouth is a representative town meeting model, and it's valued in this town. As a leader of the school district, what would you do as your role in this process, and how would you convince the community of our needs in this forum and beyond?
Excellent question. So, I think it's critical as superintendent, as I said before, we have a common vision, and my job is not only to codify that, but it's to communicate that everywhere I go, right? Town meeting is one example. Board of Selectmen, FinCom. There's a lot of groups that I, as superintendent, must get in front of and connect with and communicate with on a regular basis in order to really help folks understand what our needs are and why we're advocating for certain services. And as you all know, budget is going to be one of the biggest challenges ahead for us. And we have a responsibility, I feel, as an administrative team and as a school department to build a budget that's responsive, but it's also responsible too. And it's my job as superintendent to communicate with all the stakeholders in the community, whether it's our town meeting members going before the precinct chairs, talking with groups across this community about our needs. I need to be able to demonstrate that we're doing our due diligence to create only the necessary expenses to demonstrate the great work we're doing and the investment that our community is putting into, supporting us with in terms of their operational budget, to demonstrate that, what we're doing is working, and, so that they feel good about the investment they're making in their schools, because our residents, demand that, and they should of us. They should demand something that's both, responsive and responsible, as I said. So, it's my job to really demonstrate that and to speak with great clarity and understanding about that. And I need to communicate that and share that not only our needs, but our progress and the work that we do in a variety of venues across this community. And I can think of a specific example that I was instrumental in not too long ago with our full day kindergarten. And that was probably the last example of something, a really big ask, I think, for this community. So, if for those who aren't familiar, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I approached the superintendent about our lack of full day kindergarten and said, we really need to look into this, because we're really in the minority when it comes to not providing this kind of service. And, that's hard to sell to a community that's already making a big investment in its schools. And we're very appreciative of that. So, Dr. Maestas allowed me to move forward with a feasibility study. It was greatly detailed. I put a lot of work into that because I think it's really important to be very transparent in the process, not only to the superintendent, but to the community at large, which we ultimately did. So, in that regard, I would transfer some of the things that I did during that. We did a thorough analysis. We regularly communicated. We had a variety of audiences that we went in front of. We did focus groups. We met with parents. We met with town precinct chairs. We went to, there was a venue. If someone wanted us to speak, we were at it. So again, to kind of sum it up, I need to, as superintendent, highlight the investment of our community to our community and show them how their money is being invested. I have great experience not only here in Plymouth in the last 12 years, but in my prior district in Dedham. We were a small district with a very small budget and very few resources. So I'm very familiar with that process. And not only have I had that experience here in Plymouth, but I had that before coming here. And I would continue with very similar practices to what you've seen in the last 12 years.
Thank you, Chris. We'll now go over to Dr. Sorensen.
Dr. Campbell, putting aside the educational problems associated with COVID-19, putting that aside, what do you see as the next crisis facing public education, and what preparatory steps can we take?
The crisis, now, Dr. Sorensen, may I ask, in terms of the next crisis, not connected to even COVID-19 at all, is that what you're asking?
Not connected to the virus, correct.
Okay, thank you. So the next crisis that we see in education, that's an excellent question. I think, I really think in terms of crisis, when I think about this, I think my biggest concern really right now is mental health. I think I said this in my last interview, but I'm really concerned about the mental health of our students, as I know you are, Dr. Sorensen. You know, I've worked hard in Plymouth to support the mental health and well-being of our students, and I would continue to do that as superintendent, but I really do think that this is, it can get at a crisis level if we're not careful. I've been, instrumental in expanding wraparound services and partnerships with outside agencies for our mental health services. We provide a significant professional development towards mental health. I've successfully received significant grants for trauma and learning initiatives in our schools and continue to do that work. We've partnered with Panorama to do social emotional learning monitoring in our schools, and the prevention work we've done in terms of substance use. And a lot of it goes back to mental health. As you well know, and I know that a lot of the board members know, but for those in the public that don't know, about a third of our students in their teenage years have anxiety disorders. Our elementary students are showing greater evidence of anxiety than ever in my 26 years. We're seeing increases in significant increases in trauma in students. It's just, it's very concerning. And there's also this enormous amount of pressure that our students, particularly when they get to high school, to succeed academically, socially, athletically. And this pressure, it takes a toll, not only mentally and socially and emotionally, but it takes a toll on a student's happiness. And that's something that really, concerns me. And there are a number of factors that contribute to this, whether it's, stress at home, social media, peer relations, feeling accepted, academic pressures, like I mentioned before. These all add to those stress levels, this need for perfectionism. There are some things, I think, in terms of this crisis that we can do to try to alleviate that. And I think the first and foremost, what we need to do is, we need to talk about mental health. We need for our students and our families and everyone in our community to understand that it's okay to talk about mental health. It shouldn't be a stigma associated with it. We need to promote social emotional learning in our curriculum. And this is why I've been advocating for a health curriculum and have had the support of this board. We need to continue to educate our students on how to help themselves and also continue to educate our teachers on how to help their students. We need to provide a safe and supportive environment for all who enter our schools, and to foster that within everything we do in our school improvement plans, our district strategic plan, and a critical part of that, of all of this, as I said in Ms. Haywood's question, is about family engagement. Because if we don't engage our families in this process, anything that's critical when it comes to students, if we're not engaging our families, I can't stress it enough, we have to make positive connections with our families. It's critical. So I would say that these are some of the examples in terms of the professional development, continue to monitoring, providing the resources, students, talking about mental health, engaging with agencies to help support us. I will make mental health and continue to make mental health a large priority. I've made it a priority as assistant superintendent, and I will continue to make it a priority as superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Kim. Hi.
I can't hear you. You talking?
How are you?
Good, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so let's see. What would you do to maintain teacher morale and to support teachers, even in the face of other pressures such as budget constraints, state mandates, and increased testing and standards?
That's a great question. And I think that this is something, when we reflect on our current superintendent, who I had the great pleasure of working with for the last 12 years, this is something that Dr. Meyesis does extremely well. And I feel proud to have worked with him for the last 12 years. And I think that we have a collective or a common belief and a common philosophy about what makes us great and what we need to do as educators and as administrators. And first and foremost, when it comes to our staff, we need to inspire them. We need to make them feel supported. And it gets back to that collective purpose and encouraging people. It involves us celebrating the extraordinary work that they do, recognizing them not only at the beginning of the year but throughout the year. We need to recognize just the great accomplishments and highlight that throughout the year. It's not just during our Teacher Appreciation Week, which just happened, but throughout the year. And I did that as principal. Sometimes it's just writing a simple letter. I used to write a simple letter to all of my staff, just thanking them randomly. And that's important because it's important not just to write a general thank you, but something specific and highlight the greatness in our teachers. And this is something that's really important. I think we need to foster as an administrative team. And that's something that I would encourage through our administrators to make sure that we're doing that and recognizing just the great contributions, because teaching can be a very, very stressful thing, particularly in today's day and age. For the last, getting back to the last question that Dr. Sorensen asked me, for that reason, it can take a toll on our educators as well. So it's really important to foster the health and well-being of our staff as well, and finding opportunities for them. Our relationships are critical to our success, and the relationships we have with our staff are really important. So, we can't forget why we got into teaching as administrators, and we need to support our teachers, in that, and really, listen to them and ask them how they're doing. Reflect on the things that we sometimes find ourselves imposing on, and include them in the process. It's really important that we engage our staff in the process of everything that we're doing as administrators, to really gauge what their thoughts are on that, and work on actively listening. And because it's really important that while we have initiatives from time to time, we need to really think about the impact that it has on our staff. So it's important, again, to recognize, to bring them into the process, to collaborate with them frequently. They need to be equal partners in anything that we're doing. And I think that if you were to ask anybody across this district who knows me, there's a lot of teachers that do. I think that they would tell you that I'm someone who is the person that you see before you through the screen, of course. But that I'm someone who really cares about teachers, who really cares about the impact of the work that we do and how it impacts them. And I will, instill as the superintendent, if I'm lucky enough to obtain the position, that value in the work that we do as administrators, to make sure that we're promoting those practices across all of our schools and our departments. Really engage them and reflect on their needs and how things are affecting them, but also providing them the support and an outlet when things get tough too, which is really important.
Thank you. Now we go to Lee.
Hey, Dr. Campbell.
Hello there.
So could you define the role of the superintendent and the role of the school committee as you see it? Also, please describe how you would keep the school committee informed between meetings.
The last part you said, I couldn't hear. Sorry.
Yep, that's okay. So also, please describe how you would keep the school committee informed between meetings.
So the role of the superintendent.
Yep, and the role of the school committee, and how you would keep the school board informed between meetings.
Okay, great. So I think, a role of any good superintendent is first and foremost relationships, right? So it's not only the relationships from the superintendent and the board, but all sectors in the community, right? I really need to be an active participant in the community, and it's really important to seek the opinions of others. It's really important as superintendent. My role is to be a communicator and to build trust within our community. My role is to be responsive to situations that arise and to think with great clarity, and to delegate when necessary. My role as superintendent is to remember why I got into education, because if you don't, it's really going to shape your decisions, not for the better, I can tell you that. You really need to remember why you got into teaching. You need to lead with clear vision, which needs to be centered around children first, which I think I've already said. You need to be an instructional leader as a superintendent, first and foremost, not just academically, but behaviorally and emotionally. It's really important. We can't separate that. As superintendent, you need to support the development of your school leaders. As I said before, you have to delegate work to competent administrators. So it's really important as superintendent that you surround yourself with great people. We have great people, and that's really important. We have some great openings that we need to fill, and it's really important that we have great leaders in those positions and that we're working all, again, for that collective vision. You need to surround yourself with a strong leadership team. It's really important. A superintendent needs to be a good listener, an active listener, like I said before. It's not just hearing what people say, but it's reflecting and checking for understanding and making decisions that are truly in the best interest of what you're hearing. You need to be someone who sets bold goals and direction, but those goals need to be, measured and achievable and strategic. And I'm a strong advocate for strategic planning, which I have been for years. I think that these are attributes that I've demonstrated quite a bit over the years, and certainly the things that I will foster as superintendent. So my role with you in the school committee, is to have regular communications, obviously with the chair, and to communicate with all of you on a regular basis. So I'm a very open communicator. I hope that you all recognize that. And my role in terms of relationship is to really to share information with you early and often, to have conversations that have to do with the vision and direction of our school district. Because whether it's matters of policy or budget or whatever it is, it's really important as the elected officials to the school board that you have an understanding what's going on in our school district, and you have an opportunity to ask questions. So it's really important, I feel, that you feel that as superintendent, you're getting the information communicated to you in a timely manner, and you have a relationship with me where we can have those opportunities to have conversations on a regular basis. So my job is to make sure that I am providing you with all the information and being as transparent as possible so that you feel both educated and informed, so that when you're making decisions and advocating for certain policies or or having opportunities to connect with people within the community, that you feel that you have the information you need, and that you can ask me any questions, and we can work together again on that strategic plan, which is really important. So I hope I answered your question, Mr. Shelley.
Thank you. We'll now go to Margie Burgess. All right, just need to unmute you, Margie. Hold on for 1 sec. You just got to unmute. Oh, there we go.
All right.
You're on.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Due to the recent COVID-19 crisis, in addition to other financial concerns, the school committee is under pressure to contain the school operating budget.
Yeah.
In addition, our school age population has declined, yet our student needs are increasing. Now the question, despite these circumstances, if you believed program improvements and or additional staff were necessary, how would you approach budgeting for those improvements under these difficult circumstances?
That's an excellent question, Mrs. Burgess. Planning for the FY21 budget is, I think, one of the greatest challenges ahead of us. And I think, as it is, I think, any year, we need to be mindful of what we're asking for. And as I said before, build a responsive and responsible budget. I happen to have considerable budget development experience as well as grant writing experience. I've played an instrumental role in budget preparation for the last 12 years in this district. And actually, before coming here, in my much smaller district before, I've presented budgets before FinCom and town meeting, as well as school committee and the community at large for several years. That was a large role for me in that small district. So I have been very active in our budgeting approach during the economic recession. I mentioned, my work in Dedham, but I've managed to gain a lot of experience. So, getting to your question, Mrs. Burgess, there's increased public scrutiny, I think, in most communities, ours included, when it comes to budget and finances. So it's really important to demonstrate effective money management and be very transparent in that process. So it's important, as I said, that we develop a budget that is both responsive and responsible. So we need to demonstrate that we are implementing strategies that maximize our efficiencies. So part of our communication needs to be around that. The superintendent has to have a true understanding of the budget needs too. If you're going to get in front of town meeting or FinCom or any other board for that matter, or a parent group, you need to be able to speak very articulately with facts when asked questions about the budget. You need to know your budget, and you need to know the true understanding of the needs. So my experience, I think, even before coming to Plymouth and having those experiences that I just mentioned, coming from a district that had very little and was very small, even starting when I was a principal, it was really important that I got to know the true understanding of my budget and appreciate. I gained a great appreciation coming from a small district to really understand my school or my district's needs. So it's important that I demonstrate that. And the only way you can do that is by really understanding those needs and being visible and going into schools. And when people are asking for things, you need to be able to speak to why you need that. You need to be able to articulate why we need the budget that we need, why we're asking for the services. And despite the fact that population would be going down, speak to the unique circumstances and conditions. Again, responsive, but responsible too. I'm not saying that money solves all problems, but sometimes you need resources. You need to be able to articulate why you need those resources. It's important, I think, also in this process that we're not just looking year after year, but we're demonstrating, this historical understanding and this long-range planning and forecasting, not only for our own purposes, but for the community when we do this. So again, I have great experience with this, and I think it's important that, in terms of communicating that, take some of the principles that I just mentioned and get in front of a variety of groups. You need to, have public forums to have those conversations, but to educate and to be very transparent with our budget and finances. I think that's really important. Again, I go back to responsive and responsible. And we need to demonstrate that we're being responsive, truly responsive to the needs. And it's not all based on population trends, but in a way it is, because we're talking about the unique trends of those populations, whether it's our EL services, English language learners, whatever it is, we need to be able to articulate that with great understanding and authority. And that will be my job as superintendent, to make sure that not only I'm doing that, but every leader who comes before any group, when we're doing that regularly and communicating our needs, that we all do that with authority and clarity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We now go to Vedna for the next question.
Okay. How important do you feel it is for the superintendent to be visible throughout the community? And how will you determine where to be and how to be present in our schools, at events, and in the community at large?
Sorry, I'm writing it down. So I'm having visibility in schools, and I'm sorry, and how would I?
And how will you determine where to be and how to be present in our schools, how to be present in our schools, at events, and in the community at large?
Okay. That's great. So as I said before, I think community engagement is really important. So it's really my role as superintendent to make sure that I'm really engaging with all sectors of the community. So there's a lot, right? So whether it's our special ed parent advisory council, whether it's our PTAs, our alumni association, it could be booster clubs. There's so many different school organizations and Rotary, the list goes on and on, right? So we really need to look at, in terms of visibility, it's really important to make time in your schedule to fit those opportunities in. And as superintendent, I would make sure that I prioritize that. I'm involved in a lot of community organizations right now, so I think it's really important that you make the time in your schedule to make sure that, because you can't be everywhere at once, but you need to be everywhere at some point. So it's really important that you schedule the time in to your year, so you're in front. You have opportunities that you build in to meet with students at the high schools and the middle schools, and have conversations with them to really get to know what's going on. Meet with the PTAs, schedule an opportunity. So I think it's really about, a lot of it comes down to management and your management style. And I have a style where I really like to schedule those opportunities in, so that I can, not only walk, like what I do now, I schedule those opportunities in to not only meet with groups, but also to get around to the schools. And it's really important as superintendent that I do that as well. One of the things that I would like to do on a regular basis is to be extremely, to be visible in our schools on a regular basis. And I do that now, but scheduling that opportunity to walk around the schools with your principals, to meet, as I said, with your PTAs, to meet with various groups, and to schedule those opportunities in, so that, we can meet as, with the different sectors. And it's just really important. I go to a lot of meetings and meet with a lot of people. I think it's really important as superintendent that I have those conversations, whether it's formal meetings or informal opportunities, to hold coffees for families, to meet with parents during the day and during the night. I put a lot of hours in right now as assistant superintendent, and I have no doubt that those hours will be long as superintendent. It's something that is really important to me. That is, getting back to, I think it was your first question to say, what about community? The most important thing that we do is connecting with the community. So the more that I can get in front of groups, or my administrative team can be in front of groups, the better off we are, because we really need to be able to, as I said, work as a community at large, for the greater good of our students and our families, because strong community builds strong schools and strong students. So we really need, the sense of community is really important to me, and I will schedule those opportunities with various organizations, with, be a part of Rotary and all these other groups that I've continued to be a part of as assistant superintendent. So for me, it's really prioritizing that, those opportunities. And then, when I was a principal, I used to do the same thing. I would, with my secretary, I would schedule opportunities to meet with groups within my community at large, because I was trying to do that as principal. And then I do the work that you can't do when the groups aren't meeting, when you're by yourself, late at night. So, again, I think it's about management style, and my management style is really to try to make those priorities first and foremost, to schedule those opportunities in.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll now go back to Dr. Sorensen.
Dr. Campbell, from your experience, what are some of the common missteps made by superintendents, and how can you avoid them?
Missteps by superintendents. I think I'm gonna have to go back, because let me go back to, I think the greatest misstep that one can make is not, there's a few. I'd say communication is key. Communicating early and often, is important. So, if you're not an effective communicator, you're going to have problems. So that's one. I think visibility, as we just talked about, is really important, and really engaging with the community is critical. And I've seen, not in Plymouth, but I know of cases where some lead from their office, and that's not the way that I lead. I think that's really important, to get out of your office. And as I said, the office work is done out of office hour times, because the work that we do when our schools are open, is about connecting with our schools. So I think that, again, visibility and being out there, a misstep in terms of communication. And I think another misstep is really not, educating yourself on, the unique needs of your school district, and really having a strong team around you. So I think another misstep is working independently as a superintendent. You need to work as a team. It's critical. A superintendent is a small piece in the big puzzle, as I said. So it's my job to really work with my administrative team and those beyond that, to really do the work that we do. My job as superintendent is to bring that vision together and to help align things and help us all work strategically towards a common vision. So again, another misstep would be not leading with vision, not leading with strategic, objective outcomes in mind. We need to think, and reflect on our practice. And I've seen that sometimes not done properly. So it's really about, reflective practice, vision, strategic planning, communication is critical, visibility, and that connectedness, Dr. Sorensen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now go back to Michelle Badger.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on how we improve communication with families, and in turn, how we can increase family engagement in our schools? I think you've hit on some of this already.
Yeah, did I tell you that I believe in family engagement? No, I think, I think, in terms of family and community engagement, I can't stress this enough. It has always been a priority of mine. It's, in my opinion, it's the number one predictor of success. And I've recognized this since my teaching days. It's not just about communication, it's about engagement. I mentioned the Welcome Wagon Center idea in a family welcome center. I think this is something that's really important. I want to see us establish a family welcome center in Plymouth. I have recently gone to Barnstable, I've gone to Brockton, I've talked to New Bedford. There are some great models out there, and I think we need to look at that. I constructed my own family center as a principal, so I have some great ideas, and this goes back, several years now, obviously. I think another piece in terms of engagement is volunteers. We haven't talked about that yet. How do we engage our community in volunteerism so that we, in our schools, so that people appreciate what we have as a community. That's really important. And I've said this to many people on this board, and I've said it to many people outside in the community. The Plymouth Family Network that we have in this district is probably the greatest example of how to engage families and connect community. It's a small program, but they do amazing work. And the whole mission about strong families, strong communities means strong children. That's the work that we need to do. Our entire leadership team needs to have goals centered around family engagement. Whether you're a principal, a coordinator, a director, it doesn't matter what your role is in our district as a leader. If I'm superintendent, we will have goals centered around family engagement. It's critical to the work that we do. So, in terms of my practice, I'm going to prioritize, again, getting back to scheduling those opportunities, engaging myself and our leadership team, engaging with the communities. I think that we should be holding family academies. I've done that in the past. It's something I would like to see have as a regular practice. We need to hold times, as I mentioned already, for informal dialogues and opportunities to talk about what's going on in schools. It's important that we also, in terms of as I mentioned, the school councils, PTAs, boosters. Another thing that I would like to engage our families is through our students. And I would like to see, when I talked about having those opportunities for, student engagement, I'd like to see a superintendent's advisory council where I meet with perhaps at least our high school, but even our middle school students to talk about how, getting back to that student-centered education question, how are things going for you? What are your ideas as a student? How can we do things better? Another thing that I've advocated for that just came to me from that question was our alternative high school program. And we see the benefit and the work that that's doing because we're reflecting on our students and their needs. So I think family and community engagement is critical, and I'll continue to do everything I possibly can as superintendent to foster those practices.
Thank you.
Thank you. And your final official question is from Mr. Morgan.
Yes. Given the current financial climate, what types of creative ideas might you suggest to meet the educational needs of the students not being met within the regular budget and program?
Yeah. So I've talked a lot about the budget right now, and you're right. The budget's going to be challenging. We have to look at creative ways to find grant funding, and I have a considerable experience for that. I know you have my resume packet in front of you. You've seen that I've been very successful in obtaining and overseeing millions of dollars in grants, and we need to look for that. We need to find creative solutions to do that. We also need to work again. It goes back to community. We need to look for partners that we have a mutually beneficial purpose. And there's a lot of organizations out there that we can work with. I'm working with the Workforce Development Board right now. Matt, can't remember the name of the actual funder, but it's escaping me. It'll come to me later. But the Workforce Development Board, and seeking a grant, and I was successful in getting another grant, and that's centered around providing resources to students perhaps that don't get into our vocational technical programs, because as you all know, we have a wait list for that. And that's critical too, getting back to student-centered education. We really need to work on our, expanding those opportunities for students, not just in the vocational side, but career education. So I was successful in finding another grant and working with Mass Hires Workforce Board to bring in more resources because they have the need. They want to hire, great workers. So there's a lot of organizations out there that we need to tap on the shoulder, make a call, make a connection, and find ways to not do everything through budget, but do things through partnerships. And if you go through my resume, you're going to see, the great partnerships that I've been a part of here in Plymouth. And that's what I would do, Mr. Morgan, is continue to look for those grants, continue to look for those partnerships. But it has to go back to our strategic plan. It has to go back to that vision. You just don't get money for the sake of getting money or grants for the sake of getting grants. I've seen that, getting back to Dr. Sorensen's question about superintendents. Sometimes I've seen some that have received grants and, it's not worth the work that you put into it. So it has to be meaningful, what you do. So grants, partnerships, opportunities, volunteerism, as I mentioned before, building those resources, career, if we want to work on college and career readiness, bringing experts in. There are a lot of great people that want to come in and talk to our students and mentor our students, and it doesn't cost us any money to do that. So again, grants, partnerships, and volunteerism, and working with our community to find the best way to tap into all the resources that we have, both human capital and elsewhere. So that's what I would do.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So that concludes our official questions. And I didn't know if you had any questions for the committee before we go to your closing remarks.
I do actually. I guess I would ask, as a board and individuals, what is your greatest priority as we transition to the next school year? What would be your greatest priorities?
Whoever would like to answer, it's your floor.
I would think the priority would be able to communicate our needs, and with these tough economic times we're going to be facing, that while we won't demonstrate that we would be a team player to the town meeting, to the board of selectmen in terms of spending, while at the same token we need to provide safe, quality education to our students. So I would like our leader, the school committee, and our leader, the superintendent, to be able to communicate that to the town leaders so we can move forward and get through this economic time.
And I would add to that, we should not digress in any way.
I agree.
I was going to say, which is probably the same as, when we're working on the strategic plan again, and you mentioned it several times, is to, stick to the vision, stick to what we are striving to be, give our students the top notch, most the best education that we can. And again, just to never digress, never go backwards, but to continue to strive to be the best and to see whatever we come up with for this new strategic plan, just to make that our ultimate vision.
I agree. I would also say, I think just making sure that, as everybody says, we're not digressing, but we realize what our strengths is. And as Bob said, we're able to communicate what those strengths are and how it's so crucial to what our students are getting, regardless of if it's BPA or if it's algebra. Like, our kids need algebra, but do they necessarily need VPA? Some of them do. That is their outlet. So I think I agree with what everybody says, and just making sure that our vision and our mission and our students are first and foremost in line.
I was just gonna, say we're still in kind of some uncharted waters. So I think working collectively and steady communication throughout the board, some consistency is definitely going to be needed. But we're still in the thick of it, and I'm just going to remain positive that we can continue to work as a team and just see the best outcome for the students, the staff, and the district.
I'm going to piggyback on what Lee said. I think we have plenty of challenges ahead. This is truly uncharted territory in terms of budget, in terms of what education will look like post-pandemic. And I think that as a board, in partnership with the superintendent, we should be a collaborative team in order to kind of present what is needed for the constituents, what is needed for our students. And so that's something that I don't know, would like to see step forward.
Yeah, and I'd like to just add that that the superintendent has the stamina to stand up and to really present and be firm about what we need, but gently and nicely. It's got to be done well with the community in mind, but that when we really need something, we really need to stand up. And I think probably you can use your team there, but your team here too.
Yeah. Important team, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Dr. Campbell, that you had, or it's up to you?
No other questions. No, that's really, I think that sums up. I had another question, but it's related. So I think you all hit upon that. I think it's really important that we continue to move forward. We continue to work as a team, and I would look forward to working with all of you as a team as well. So yeah, no other question. Yeah.
Awesome. So at this point, just your closing remarks. Anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered, and go from there.
Thank you. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for this opportunity. As I said in my initial interview a while ago, I never thought I'd be seeking the position of superintendent or assistant superintendent, for that matter. Mrs. Fry and I have had these conversations. However, I've been blessed in my 26 years to acquire a tremendous amount of experience and had great mentorship from great leaders, and that helped shape me into the person that I am and the leader I am today. As someone who is very familiar with the enormous responsibilities associated with the Plymouth superintendent in Plymouth, I believe that I'm the candidate that you need for this position. I feel strongly that I possess the commitment, that stamina that you were talking about, Mrs. Burgess, the experience and the relationships that this district needs, particularly at this time. I have demonstrated success in this district, and I have been a significant contributor to many of our great initiatives, and we had many of them in these last 12 years, which we need to continue with, as has been said. My ability to work effectively and collaboratively with students, families, and district staff, as well as the community at large, has been demonstrated and will continue to be a priority of mine. As I mentioned in my opening statements, my experience is deep and comprehensive. I'm not applying to other districts. I think it's important you know that. I have never applied to another district since I've been in Plymouth, and I'm committed to Plymouth. My 3 children have been educated in this district since preschool, as I mentioned. I care deeply about this community and its overwhelming, its overwhelming well-being. I feel that it's particularly important during these times, as we just said, that you have someone like that. I feel confident that you're not going to find another candidate with such personal commitment to this town and the school community. As a board, you felt it was important to engage the entire community before initiating the superintendent search, and I really value that because I think it was a really smart move and important. And I reviewed that feedback because it was publicly presented, and there were several points, which I wrote down in notes here, several points identified in that feedback. The community, first and foremost, wants a superintendent that's honest and ethical. And I feel that anyone who knows me would say that I am a very honest and ethical person. In fact, several of my letters of recommendation speak to those qualities specifically. This community wants someone who's assertive, persistent, and goal-oriented. Even before I began my career in Plymouth, when I was a superintendent finalist here 13 years ago, I spoke about the importance of having a strategic plan with lofty goals, grounded in proven identified needs. We didn't have a strategic plan back then, but I spoke about that. I value that. Plymouth is looking for someone who's transparent. As I said a few minutes ago, I'm the person that you see before you. I'm open with my beliefs. I'm not someone who will surprise you with my actions, and I'm very open with my communication. Another note that I noticed in the comments was that Plymouth is looking for an inclusive leader. You will not find another candidate, in my opinion, more committed and experienced with promoting and supporting inclusive practices than me. As I said in my initial interview, Plymouth is about to experience, which we've all said tonight, great change and great loss. We are losing a remarkable man and leader and friend, for that matter, with Dr. Maestas' retirement. We're losing, in my opinion, one of the greatest business managers with Mr. Costner's retirement. Same could be said for Mr. Montron's retirement, who has served this district for almost 35 years now. We're experiencing great changes. We're entering a very unsettling economic climate, like we've said this evening. If you want a superintendent that possesses an intimate understanding of this district and community, I am that person. If you're looking for a superintendent that will commit to this district for the long haul, I'm that person. If you want someone that has the backing and support of many of our great teachers, leaders, parents, and community members here in Plymouth, again, I'm that person. And if you want, if having a superintendent with the roots in this community and connectedness in this community is important to you, again, I'm that person. Dr. Maestas and I have worked together. We've worked very well together these last 12 years, and I feel blessed to have worked side by side for him for so long. I tell them that, and I've been telling them that more and more recently, actually. I believe the secret to our success is that we have a common belief and philosophy. This is really the key to any district's success. But for us, it's truly led to some great outcomes for students. And I will continue to lead with that same passion and commitment to greatness. I think it's crucial that we believe in our collective purpose. And I said that in a couple of the questions asked tonight. And our collective purpose is to make a positive difference in the lives of students. And I understand that as superintendent, I am a small part of the story here. And it's my job to enable others to see that and fulfill their potential. My role, I keep using the word codify because I think it's important to codify that collective vision and express it with clarity everywhere I go within this community. As I already said before, I've had the privilege of gaining substantial experience these past 12 years. I've been a contributor to our high school construction projects with MSBA. I've supported the development of budgets during economic recessions. I've successfully obtained and managed millions of dollars in competitive grants. I've played a considerable role in the expansion of many curricular opportunities across this district, whether it's full day kindergarten, expansion of our foreign language program, biomedical pathway, the international exchange opportunities we have, just to name a few. I have led in times of great crisis in this community and have done so with great focus and responsiveness. I've gone out of my way to involve myself on many boards and communities, committees, as I said earlier, here in Plymouth, because I value the importance of community and its overall impact on the collective well-being of our kids and the betterment of our entire school community. So I mentioned these few examples to you just to stress that while I feel my connectedness to community is a tremendous asset, I also come with an extensive experience. So in my 12 years here in Plymouth, as well as my years in Dedham before coming to Plymouth, I've been a significant contributor to critical events and circumstances, whether it's matters of budget management, negotiations, community relations, school and district leadership opportunities, or curriculum instruction. I have great experience. And after reviewing my resume packet, which you all have, and my letters of recommendation, I hope you agree that I am the best candidate for the Plymouth Public Schools. So in closing, I want to thank you all for this opportunity. Really, it means a lot to me. And if you choose me as the next superintendent, I promise I won't let you down. In fact, I believe they will continue to lead this district in a great direction, just as we were just all talking about a minute ago. So again, I just want to thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
And, we're going to, as a committee, meet a little bit longer here this evening.
All right, I don't want to keep you any longer, so thank you. And
Thank
I'll see
you,
you at
Dr.
the next
Campbell.
school committee meeting.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chris.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Chris.
All right,
Thanks, Chris.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'll be in touch, Chris,
All right, very good.
on next steps.